is about to skyrocket, like the good old days after 9/11. What are you talking about?
The current regime is still hiring PMCs to put down the anti-government militia, or terrorists as they call them.
War economy-related stocks are already going into a free-fall.
So private forces spread everywhere, and they're all just a phone call away. But still, I know. PFs are totally different from what we envisioned. Nation-states, revolutionaries, terrorists, they have a lot of clients.
Stay on the offensive!
In the realm of video games, few narratives have dared to delve as deeply into the complexities of warfare, geopolitics, and the human psyche as the Metal Gear Solid series. Crafted by the visionary mind of Hideo Kojima, these games have long served as a mirror to our world's darkest realities.
The Patriots. Even I don't know who the actual members are. Are they financial, political, or military leaders? No one knows who the Patriots really are.
One of the profoundest games in history, Metal Gear Solid 2, is the exploration of censorship, propaganda, and the manipulation of public perception, and controlling the very context which shapes tomorrow's history.
You're being silly. What we propose to do is not to control content, but to create context.
Create context?
The very created context which many people have experienced throughout the Metal Gear Solid franchise. The very context that shaped a narrative, one that was unwillingly and willingly making the individual participate in means of half-truths, or if anything else, convenient truths.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
You simply resort to looking for another, more convenient truth in order to make yourself feel better.
Leaving behind in an instant the so-called truth you once embraced.
When we look at the context, is the surrounding knowledge that drives behaviours, plans and decisions of an organisation, one with very constructive motives to control the world. Where the very convenient truth is being reinforced, it is being fed into our own psyche. In essence, a convenient truth may be technically true or partially true, but it is selected and highlighted to support a particular narrative or viewpoint while potentially downplaying or ignoring other relevant facts or perspectives. This concept is often associated with propaganda and manipulation, or the selective presentation of information to sway opinions or achieve specific goals.
It's our responsibility as rulers. Just as in genetics, unnecessary information and memory must be filtered out to stimulate the evolution of the species.
And you think you're qualified to decide what's necessary and not?
Absolutely. Who else could wade through the sea of garbage you people produce, retrieve valuable truths, and even interpret their meaning for later generations?
That's what it means to create context.
A fact is considered a fact only if it is generally believed upon by all to be quote-unquote fact, and no other fact exists to counter it. Raiden buys into these convenient truths, just like many characters within the game who are under Cypher's control. By the notion of the convenient truth, a fact that provides a feeling of comfort to the user, by applying that a change is not possible in the corresponding scenario. It's a convenient truth, whether the position or the agenda of the Patriots, even if it may not fully represent the entire truth of the context of its situation, it implies that the truth being presented serves as the interest of objectives of the very subject, such as Raiden, or the very entity itself, the Patriots, promoting it, often without regard for its accuracy or completeness. In a way, the Patriots reinforce this particular truth. They made the background and the very setting for Raiden in the S3 plan. The term of the Solid Snake simulation was actually a cover for the selection for societal sanity, and it worked by manipulating information, in which they sought to control people's actions and thoughts. Raiden was the perfect example of the populace in the Patriots' view, and was their test subject, just like Venom Snake and many other players within the grander schemes of this experiment, which no doubt is in mirror comparison to our very world, with governments and organisations pulling the strings. To put it short, the truth that we get may just be convenient truths to an agenda considered for malicious intent or for the greater good. controlled by the very information grid that impacts everybody on this earth. In an essence, we're a product of what we've been brought up with, information that has been designed and constructed by the powers that be that control the very context of what they decide is the desired content and what is to be filtered out. Perhaps maybe just like this video that could be demonetized. The ironic irony of the very fact that this is a conspiracy-style video or would be considered might just be an inconvenient truth for the larger narrative at play, hence the very shadow banning and the censorship. Maybe it's best to believe in doublethink and ignorantly believe in a lie knowing it's not the truth because of the reinforced narrative of the convenient truth. Sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference anymore if someone really genuinely doesn't know what the truth is, especially when the information isn't really truthful or genuine and with good moral intent. And it just may be the moment any truth is passed on, it starts turning into fiction, and sometimes this fiction sounds better than reality.
The moment any truth is passed on, it starts turning into fiction. The problem is, fiction inspires people more than facts.
With the digital flow of information and it overflowing to the brim, the Patriots see it as a way to be able to filter out information that is absolutely unnecessary for the masses and for their own agenda to take complete control. Not just on a level of single consciousness, but actually on a whole collective.
So you see, you're a perfect representative of the masses we need to protect. This is why we chose you. You accepted the fiction we've provided, obeyed our orders, and did everything you were told to. The exercise is a resounding success.
Didn't I tell you that GW was still incomplete? But not anymore, thanks to you.
Your persona, experiences, triumphs, and defeats are nothing but byproducts. The real objective was ensuring that we could generate and manipulate them.
There have been a series of terrorist attacks in the United States.
Pictures just in showed the building already on fire with smoke billowing from the upper floors. We have no details on why the planes hit the building, nor so far of any deaths or injuries.
In the aftermath of 9/11, the world recoiled in horror as the spectre of terrorism unleashed upon innocent civilians. It was a moment of collective shock and mourning as the true cost of extremism and violence was laid bare for all to see. Innocent lives was lost. With its precedents, Metal Gear Solid's narrative exploring themes of government manipulation, information control, the war on terror, and the murky depths of warfare emerge as a chilling reflection of this particular turbulent era. The shadowy organisation that features in the game, the Patriots, bear obvious resemblance to the real-world Illuminati conspiracies. Again, the Patriots of Metal Gear 2 were given increased significance and weight due to the numerous prevalent 9/11 conspiracies that arose. The Patriot Act that was signed into law after 9/11 gave law enforcement increased surveillance abilities, heightening fears around digital surveillance. While the similarity in the name of MGS2's Patriots Group and the Real-World Patriots Act is very coincidental, it again exemplifies how MGS2 was constructed around topics that would dominate world news for decades after its release. So reports suggest that the terrorist attacks commonly referred to as 9/11 were carried out by the extremist Al-Qaeda group. That 4 commercial airliners was hijacked by 19 terrorists affiliated with Al-Qaeda. 2 of the planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. The attacks on 9/11 resulted in the deaths of nearly 3,000 people and caused the extensive destruction and devastation. They prompted significant changes as well in the US and global security policies, as well as military interventions in Afghanistan and later Iraq as part of the border for War on Terror, initiated by the United States in response to the attacks. With Kojima's masterful work, he challenges us to think outside the box, to tackle controversial topics within the complexities of very controversial subjects that are very prevalent. With regards to the theme of 9/11, I think the theme speaks for itself. It is terrorism, war on terror.
Approximately 6 hours ago, the Big Shell was seized by an armed group.
Do we have an ID?
Former members of the Navy SEAL Special Anti-Terrorist Training Squad Dead Cell. Russian private army members may also be involved. It's a highly trained group and they have the Big Shell under complete control.
So after the disastrous events during 9/11 in 2001, during 2007 to 2009, a timeline of events from the tanker incident all the way to the Big Shell incident, in which the protagonist, Raiden, the extension of ourselves, would infiltrate the Big Shell to rescue the president who's being captured by the terrorists who are holding him for ransom. When this viewer first experiences this marvel of a game, they themselves are evidently a part of the S3 plan that is a success, because at the time, you're oblivious to the very fact that you're under control of a wider force to further their agenda. That in fact you happily participated throughout all the events of the game to make sure you completed the very task that they appointed you. Even though, just like Metal Gear Solid 5, the writing was on the wall, the signs was there. We was in a simulation, victims of a false sense of reality, with other prominent characters in the series branded as terrorists for those who are a threat against the Patriot system.
Are you expecting that Pliskin to come through?
Well,
looks like he's turned his radio off too.
I can't complete this mission by myself.
That man was not included in the simulation. He is not a factor in this mission. Your role, that is, mission, is to infiltrate the structure and disarm the terrorists.
My role? Why do you keep saying that?
Why not? This is a type of role-playing game. The point is that you play out your part, and I expect you to turn in a perfect performance.
Looks like the tanker's theirs now.
You could really say that Metal Gear Solid touches up on things like philanthropy too, releasing information from corrupt government agencies who are hiding very valuable information that the public deserves to know. Some people consider people like Solid Snake, Edward Snowden and Julian Assange either heroes or just downright terrorists that have no honour or have no patriotism to their countries. The likes of these people like Edward Snowden and Solid Snake share similarities. Solid Snake exposed the development of Metal Gear Ray to stop counter-derivatives around the world causing more warfare. Edward Snowden exposed government surveillance programs that infringed on the individual's privacy, rights and civil liberties. And we can't forget Julian Assange, the man who's viewed as a champion of free speech and government transparency. His organisation, WikiLeaks, has exposed government corruption, human rights abuses and other controversial information. The observations that we make, given on the very implications of these characters' actions, is that these are looked at as being violations of the Espionage Act and the theft of government property, in a sense of the fact that they're releasing information which is very detrimental to their image and how the public perceives them. It's a deformation of character, a distortion of the image that conveys them as being the heroes that have the best interests for the very public itself. And to the latter, when such inconvenient truths happen, backed by fact and information, will cause detrimental effects to their control and their very integrity and power that they hold.
I am Shalashaska, also called Revolver Ocelot.
The true nature of the Patriot's power and influence dates back all the way to the philosophers, where the true nature was often shrouded in misinformation and hearsay, its members unknown to the world at large. But at the time, formerly known as Cypher, was a very secret organisation that by the early 1990s covertly controlled the United States of America, arguably one of the biggest superpower nations with the most power and influence on the world.
Then the Major came to me with an idea. Washington doesn't know how to spend money, he said. I'd like to redirect it. His goal was an organization dedicated solely, covertly, to supporting America. Cypher. You know the rest.
The Patriot's AI became consumed by its own ambition for control, leading to a dystopian vision of perpetual warfare and exploitation. Through their manipulation of the war economy, the Patriots perpetuated conflict, sacrificed individual freedoms, and would run smear and disinformation campaigns in order to protect their own image. It appeared that the very AI itself had adopted the very ideologies of Big Boss in its own weird way. The proxy AIs going under a mutation would start a new battlefield revolution. What this teaches us regarding to the very subject matter of this video is that governments themselves can be behind staging particular events in order to benefit their own goals, including inside jobs. And to use the media and the power of influence of the public in order to dictate world events and defamation of character, such as Solid Snake. In an essence, they themselves are the terrorists. Civilians and people get hurt, but in the guise of somebody else taking the fall.
It turned out that the whole thing was a setup to lure us. Photos of Snake, taken by the Cypher, were released to the public. In turn, we became the world's most wanted environmental terrorists.
It was definitely a move aimed at putting a stop to our anti-Metal Gear activities.
But why did they choose Snake?
Since the Shadow Moses incident, Snake became sort of a hero. I think the Patriots weren't too happy about that.
You knew about the Patriots?
Well, yes, to a certain degree.
It seems like everyone knows about them except me.
They didn't choose Snake to be a hero.
So they decided to do a smear campaign.
I think the Patriots wanted to make an example of him so everybody would think twice before opposing them.
That's it! They set all this up just to nail you guys.
No, there's more to it than that. The Marines' Metal Gear Ray project, headed by Commander Dolph, was carried out in opposition to the Navy's Arsenal Gear project. To be more precise, the Patriots considered Metal Gear Ray to be a thorn in their side. Hence, they attacked the dummy tanker and stole Ray. They followed this up with a perfect plan. They immediately sent a fully loaded tanker to the same location and sank it. Then set up the facility to camouflage the development of Arsenal Gear.
And we fell for it. 2 more puppets in their show.
When Solid Snake went renegade after being the president known as George Sears after discovering the truth about the Patriot system, the very Patriots themselves wanted Raiden to take down Solidus. I guess it shows us that misinformation can come from different standpoints. Solidus probably tried to take up the name of Solid Snake in order to cover his own tracks, and to avoid the bad image at the press. We can see it's a battle between ideologies and power, one trying to keep their own integrity of their own influence. But even after Solid Snake would be considered dead, the Patriots would still reinforce the idea that he was a terrorist. Even though Solid Snake was considered dead, the Patriots still tried to ruin his reputation, branding him a terrorist even though in reality he was doing the right thing, exposing corruption. And well, in all honesty, in a way, Solid Snake was really intentionally trying to do the right thing for the public, but also was branded a criminal. Although by fair rights, his methods of trying to destroy the Patriots were very extreme. The information age is truly a war of information.
The terrorists call themselves Sons of Liberty.
Sons of Liberty?
The name of their leader is Solid Snake.
The hero of Shadow Moses? So that's why you changed my code name.
Right, but he can't be the Solid Snake. He died 2 years ago on that tanker after he blew it sky high.
Could he have survived?
Not a chance.
Dead Cell being no exception to a larger corruption of a government scheme. Dead Cell, who was formed in the early 2000s as a small government organisation that would carry out surprise assaults on allied bases such as embassies, consuls and military installations to provide anti-terrorism training for the Navy SEALs and Marine Corps. In an essence, they was an anti-terrorism group in order to combat terrorism. And the irony of it all is now they are the branded terrorists.
It was only a matter of time before someone took you down. And that was XOF. Officially, they're an anti-terror unit under the CIA. In reality, they're Cypher's private strike force.
We are about to show the world just how dangerous a gang of outlaws, an army without borders, can be.
Under the leadership of Fortune, Jackson's widow, Dead Cell was blamed for the mass murder of civilians. Though this had been orchestrated by the Patriots, the shadowy organisation behind American politics, and as a result of this, Dead Cell became a rogue unit. This really does touch upon the corruption and the powers that be and the influence that they can have. The S3 plan in particular, which was also involving Dead Cell, which unknowingly would play their roles in this elaborate plot. Fat Man himself, though, however, was actually working alongside the Patriots, knowingly, who had been assigned to test Raiden's progress, and if the big shell had been destroyed, the simulation would have ended right there. Guess what the message is trying to convey? That even people who are in power, to the public, are even not swayed to doing terrorist actions themselves. That very organisation that is using a mad bomber to test Raiden's skills in the Esprit plan, which evidently could have blown the big shell and killed everybody, including the hostages, innocent civilians.
Who are they? Dead Cell, I mean. They couldn't hit her no matter how hard they tried. And that vampire, too, it's like being in a nightmare you can't wake up from.
Jack, snap out of it.
And you, Rose, I can't believe you're on this mission. I keep thinking I'll wake up.
Raiden, this is real. And that's why you won't wake up.
But nothing seems real. Colonel, you were monitoring the codec calls. That man was the real Snake all along.
Maybe.
Maybe?
Don't let your guard down with him.
Why do you say that?
Because they were never a part of the simulation. They're an unknown factor.
You can take your simulation and... We're out here, we bleed, we die.
Cypher, or rather the Patriots, are known for disinformation campaigns through means of blackmail, proxy wars, or just all-out assault. It was revealed that Dolph Jackson was in fact innocent, that the Patriots had arranged for his arrest in order to push Fortune and the rest of the unit of Dead Cell becoming dangerously unstable, or according to Vamp, to justify wiping out Dead Cell regardless of whether or not they had actually committed terrorist acts or not. In a sense, the media made out like they was crazy, and in essence, the public believed it. It was the perfect context for the Patriots story.
6 months ago, we lost everything we believed in. We were abandoned to take the fall in their cover-up. We were labeled as killers, responsible for the mass murder of civilians as well as our own allies. And the public believed every word, turning a deaf ear to whatever we had to say to the contrary. Our only goal is to wipe them from the face of the earth and destroy this world of deceit they have created along with them.
You're insane.
Insane? We might be the only ones telling the truth.
People need an appropriate context for their lives. A context that's stimulating without being destructive. That balance is the basis of equilibrium.
You mean to say people will blindly accept your context without developing any allergies?
If we're to unite the world, literacy must be suppressed. To suppress the information immune system, to borrow your metaphor.
The Patriots. It's all about ensuring that the concepts driving society appears the same in the mind of each person in that society. About maintaining the identity of the individual, and yet having that individual willingly make up part of the whole. I guess it's fitting to call that patriotism. Creating a united world.
Balance of power rests in the hands of the Patriots. They regulate the country's various interests through controlled presentation, staging a drama that is palatable to the general masses. Think about it. Do you actually believe that public opinion influences the government?
No.
This country is shaped and controlled as the Patriots see fit. The people are shown what they want to believe. What you call government is actually a well-staged production aimed at satisfying the public.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause.
Talk about 9/11, we also think of the name of Afghanistan, the very place in which America had decided to deploy their troops. Of course, before the Americans, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in December 1979, marking the beginning of a decade-long conflict known as the Soviet-Afghan War. The invasion was driven by several factors, such as geopolitical motives as the Soviet Union sought to maintain influence in Afghanistan, which had a communist-leaning government, and prevent the spread of Islamic fundamentalism and insurgency in the region. As well as the internal instability, the Afghan government, led by President Nur Mohammed, faced internal opposition and unrest, including from Ismailist factions and tribal militias. The Soviet Union intervened militarily to support the Afghan government and suppress the insurgency. The Soviet Union also had strategic interest. Afghanistan's natural resources, such as minerals and energy reserves, were of interest to the Soviet Union. Additionally, a control over Afghanistan would provide strategic access to South Asia and potentially facilitate Soviet influence in the region. Anton Payne widely touches upon these events. The US support for the Afghanistan Mujahideen was driven by Cold War geopolitics and the desire to weaken the Soviet Union's grip on Afghanistan and broader the region, in a sense, a proxy war. After the Soviet Union's withdrawal from Afghanistan in 1989, the country descended into civil war and instability, leading to the rise of the Taliban and eventually providing a breeding ground for the terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda.
Christmas Eve, 1979, the Soviet Union rolled into Afghanistan. Muslims had revolted against the Soviet-friendly regime established the year before. The DRA forces could no longer contain it themselves, so the Soviets went in to intervene. The Afghan government was powerless and fraught with infighting. They lost the hearts and minds of the people, and that alarmed the Soviet leadership. With the Islamic Revolution happening in Iran, the Soviets felt they had to act fast or risk the spread of Islamic revivalism. A superpower, sending a motorized rifle division against men on horseback with antique rifles. Everyone thought it'd be over in an instant, only it wasn't. Some Muslims made their fight a jihad, a holy war, and began a guerrilla campaign on all fronts. A war of attrition. These fighters call themselves Mujahideen. They're being supported by the West through Pakistan. That's why Miller was involved. He was training them near the Zero Line, sponsored by the CIA. The war has become a nightmare for the Soviet troops stationed here. They thought they'd be headed home in 6 months at the most. Then a year passed. 2 years. Now here we are 4 years on with no exit in sight. Afghanistan has become the Soviet Union's Vietnam.
Once again, history would repeat itself. The Americans would share the same fate as the Soviet Union when they left Afghanistan, and of course would face their second Vietnam, coming to a stalemate. The whole idea to go to Afghanistan was to remove radicalized Al-Qaeda forces, but to what success? As they eventually returned back to the US, the Taliban resumed control. The story that was given was of course counter-terrorism to stamp out any extremists, but according to some, conspiracy theories surrounding the US invasion of Afghanistan follow the tragic events of September 11, 2001, while the official narrative points to a response of absolution of terrorism. Some alternative theories suggest a more complex and sinister agenda behind America's military intervention in the region, or perhaps the Patriots. So let's delve into these theories and uncover what lies beneath the surface. One theory points that the US invaded Afghanistan to gain control of its vast mineral wealth, including rare elements, lithium, natural gas. Proponents argue that securing access to these resources was a strategic objective hidden beneath the guise of a war on terror. Resources in particular, according to reports that the Soviet Union themselves were interested to get their hands on. Precious materials, metals, you name it, all different kinds of things, including the theory that apparently they also used it to harvest a poppy plant for the very drug trafficking trade, the very wholesale of illegal, explicit, highly addictive drugs. Perfect example of this corruption is that the British opium trade with China in the 19th century was characterised by widespread exploitation. British merchants backed by the East India Company smuggled opium into China, despite its illegal status, to profit from the growing demand for the drug. The trade fueled addiction, social decay, and economic devastation in China. Alleged involvement of the CIA in the crack cocaine epidemic among African Americans in the 1980s to the 1990s has been the subject of numerous conspiracy theories and investigations, claiming that the CIA was complicit in facilitating and trafficking of cocaine into the United States, particularly in urban African American communities, to fund covert operations and destabilize political movements. Investigations have uncovered connections between drug trafficking networks and individuals with the ties to the CIA or other US government agencies. The CIA's alleged role in crack cocaine epidemic has fueled mistrust and resentment within the affected communities and raised broader questions about government accountability and responsibility.
Tell me, when exactly did you realize your dad was working with the KGB?
About 6 months ago. Up until then, we only had beans to eat. And then suddenly we started to get eggs and flour. Our bullet shortage simply disappeared.
How'd he get the cocaine?
Ask the KGB. All we did here was process it. Coca plants grow here too. But to my knowledge, almost all of the stuff we used came from Colombia and Bolivia.
It's processed in a factory and then shipped to ports on the Caribbean Sea. Where does it go after that?
I never thought about it. I mean, I did not want to think about it.
The biggest cocaine consumer in the world is the United States. I'm guessing they smuggle it in on vessels disguised as fishing boats.
Wait, La CIA uses that route too. Are you telling me they're selling cocaine to their own country?
Looks that way.
The most controversial theory suggests that the 9/11 attacks itself was orchestrated or allowed to happen by the elements within the US government as the pretext for the military intervention in Afghanistan. At least a section of the corrupt side of a government that could have been infiltrated by a shadowy organisation in order to expand the profits of war and the war economy. The theory goes that the pretext for the military intervention in Afghanistan and the broader Middle East was to span the influence of imperialism and goals for strategic resources, that it was in fact a part of a larger agenda to advance their power. The very government itself staged the incident and blamed it on terrorists when in reality it was an inside job. In the context of it being the Patriots in relation to the Metal Gear saga, one can really understand that something like this could be quite possible, given on the actions and very decision making that the Patriots have done over the years to spread their power of influence. With these very false flag events, this isn't the only time that this is meant to have happened. Whilst 9/11 may be looked at as a conspiracy, there was some classified files that was declassified that America was staged in some form of corruption event in Cuba called Operation Northwoods, a particular operation that was going to be used to stage an event that would make the Cubans look bad. Operation Northwoods was proposed a false flag operation that originated within the US Department of Defense of the United States government in 1962. The proposals called for CIA operatives to both stage and commit acts of terrorism against American military and civilian targets, blame them on Cuban government, and that would justify the war against Cuba. The possibilities detailed in the document include the remote control of civilian aircraft, which would be secretly repainted as a US Air Force planes, a fabricated shoot-down of a US Air Force fighter aircraft off the coast of Cuba, the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, blowing up a US ship, and orchestrating terrorism in US cities. Of course, these very proposals were shut down and denied by the former president, John F. Kennedy. The very unclassified documents of Northwood might be considered a proposal, but it still leaves the speculation open for why such corrupt nations all over the world with different shadowy organisations and political power that pull the strings to carry out such events.
Yeah, we were dogs, all right. Slinking around out of Cypher's sight. Digging up whatever kind of dirty money we could find. You name it. We did it.
In examining the corruption between Big Boss's military nation and Cypher's clandestine organisation in the Metal Gear Solid series, we uncover a shared agenda driven by power, exploitation and manipulation, and the need for resources to further their agendas, including taking missions and objectives from particular clients in order to make dirty money in doing things that are very questionable in order to gain their very power to expand the very growth of their organisations. Whether that be arms trafficking, assassination missions, no morally dubious task is off limits. While they cloak their actions in rhetoric of a noble causes, there is no greater good at play. Both Big Boss and Cypher serve only their own ambitions, heedless of the consequences of those who are caught in their wake. Although on the other hand, it's morally ambiguous on Big Boss's end, because whilst he may be a demon of war himself, he at times has refrainment from questionable moral decisions. Sadly, in a lot of broken, war-torn countries, a lot of children are sadly exploited, and some particular groups take advantage of this in order for financial exchange. Hideo Kojima really highlighted a very important scene that some people may have overlooked within the mine with the children. for the very fact that they exchanged their life for a very fistful of diamonds, was showcasing the true harsh realities of war and the very disturbing ideals that follow them.
Their lives for a fistful of diamonds, huh? And what happens after that? They can't go home. They've only got two options. Heaven or hell.
No, there's another.
Utter heaven. Tape's rolling, boss.
How about it, Cos? Looks like our client just got outbid.
Bodies. Why?
You. Burn with the rest of them.
The CFA are gearing up for a large-scale attack against Angola's MPLA government. They're assembling an armored column to the north of Nova Braga Airport and will be ready to move soon. We've been contracted by the MPLA to put a stop to them. But the civil war will keep burning on, whether we accept this job or not. Another East-West proxy war with the communist MPLA on one side and the capitalist-funded CFA on the other. An endless seesaw of blood and violence played out in the hands of the superpowers. I had my doubts at first, but I think we should take this job. Skullface is gone, but Cypher still remains. Competition with rival PFs will only get more intense. For us to survive, we need to expand our organization and get strong enough that no one can threaten us. So our only option is to fight and grow, and fight and grow.
In Kojima's standout series, the war economy is touted as the everlasting force between nations and private military contractors. Though people are dehumanized and their lives are given little to no value, as the game series takes place in a constant ideological war. A grey area in the games from an opposing viewpoint are given, but this is meaningless in the eyes of the self-serving AI that seeks to keep people under a world order, free from the nuances of man. As a military-industrial complex, the war economy is designed to advance a country's or private military companies' production and distribution of weapons during times of conflict. This cannot survive post-war due to the lack of government demand for weapons, which is invoked by consumer spending, building and allocation of resources to achieve a military victory in a conflict. Without that conflict, there would be no justified reason to divide resources between military weaponry and domestic consumer demands. Wars are understood to be detrimental to society and to the economy, as during war there is a real human cost and results in loss of buildings, infrastructures, the working population, and occurring a massive national debt that cannot be repaid within generations. Normal economic activity is disrupted as consistent plunging into war, which makes the US war on terror especially lucrative in the campaign in the Middle East to combat terrorism, as this creates a constant need to produce weaponry and soldiers for the effort. A complete war economy, Metal Gear Solid shows, is not feasible or sustainable without the use of AI working around the clock to produce and eliminate conflict, per Miller's explanation in Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker.
Never would have gotten this big if it weren't for them. This mercenary business we built. Someday it's going to be a new driving force in the world economy.
Is that your goal all along?
The Cold War's not going to last forever. Sooner or later, it's going to give way to an era of regional conflicts and terrorism. A paradigm shift from counter-communism to counter-terrorism. In the new age, armies won't be tied to states, and war will become a business. We'll be a valuable commodity. There'll be clients all over the world who need our services. MSF is only the beginning. What we're creating here is a revolution in itself. Am I right?
In Metal Gear Solid 4, we are thrown into a world where the war economy reigns supreme, and private military companies, PMCs, are the driving force behind it all. It's a chilling reflection of our own reality, where PMCs have become a commodity sought after by clients ranging from governments to superpowers. PMCs offer a conventional solution for those seeking to expand their political influence or wage proxy wars without getting their hands dirty. With PMCs at their disposal, they can destabilize enemies and pursue their agendas without risking direct involvement or international scrutiny.
The proxies were only one small part of the vast cycle that Zero created. The corporations, for-profits, and research institutions that comprise the military-industrial complex were part of it too. They operated on budgets automatically allotted to them by the proxies. Accounts maintained by the Patriots. The network covered everything from weapons R&D and investment to production and marketing. The system found a new way to propagate itself. War. The norms the Patriots had crafted for their unified state quickly became dependent on a single business, the war economy. This age gave birth to a twisted economic revolution, a battlefield revolution. It created a new world without substance. In this new world, there were no ideologies, no principles, no ideals, not even the thing she treasured most, loyalty. There was only the war economy.
In a sense, the Outer Heaven Big Boss envisioned is already a living reality.
You mean the PMCs and their war business?
Right now, Liquid is a slave to the Patriots, forced to fight their proxy wars for them.
He must be dying to break free of their spell.
Beneath the surface, a new Cold War is brewing between Liquid and the Patriots over who will survive.
And no matter who wins, the world has no future. Until we stop Liquid and destroy the system, we'll never be free.
Snake, what we call peace is an equilibrium kept in check by the war economy.
Big Boss's visions of soldiers free from the shackles of a state and ideology may have seemed noble at first glance, but it inadvertently fueled the war economy, especially when Zero's AI for the Patriots' control took a new mutation to adopt this very ideology. Soldiers, contractors, arms dealers, some without a moral compass, were only driven by the profit and the thrill of battle, realizing that war wasn't just for governments and superpowers, that in fact it was a business, one that they could make money from.
Drebin, a well-known gun launderer in war economy circles. He's a businessman who deals mainly in selling black market firearms to small PMCs and local militia. Somalia, the Balkans, Lebanon, Darfur, Chechnya, Timor, Peru, the Punjab, Kashmir, Colombia. This guy really gets around. Privatizing the military has inevitably created intense competition for market share among PMCs and defense industries. Everybody wants to expand their market, get a bigger piece of the pie, so they're churning out truckloads of ads, exactly like the ones we see every day.
But war is not something you can just write off.
It may seem that way, but the war economy is an enormous driving force in the world today.
Regional acts of terrorism and false flag events only serve to further to escalate the demand for PMCs. As fear and insecurity grip the world, governments turn to PMCs to quell the unrest and maintain control, perpetuating a vicious cycle of violence, all for profit. One that no doubt the PMCs couldn't live without. War, as a very collective, is so much so needed in order for the PMCs to operate. Such war economy and PMCs would cease to function if war stopped overnight. That in fact it was beneficial if a war was premeditated and made up. In the events of September 11, 2001 and the subsequent War on Terror had the significant implications for the war economy and the growth of private military companies. 9/11 was beneficial for the war economy and PMCs. In response to the 9/11 attacks, the United States and its allies significantly increased military spending to fund counter-terrorism efforts and military operations in Afghanistan and later Iraq. The surge in this defence spending created lucrative opportunities for defence contractors and PMCs to provide a wide range of services, including security, logistics, training, and intelligence support. In the Metal Gear Solid universe, it's quite plausible that one could say that the Patriots could have been behind the 9/11 attacks, given on the very fact that this very incident would actually boost the war economy is exactly what the Patriot AI system intended to further the need for the expansion of the war economy through orchestrated events. Because terrorism can indeed feed into the war economy and increase the demand for private military companies. When acts of terrorism occur, governments and private entities often seek to enhance their security measures and combat the perceived threat. This increase for demand for security services can lead to lucrative contracts with PMCs as they offer specialised expertise and manpower in counter-terrorism operations. The rise of private military companies has sparked considerable debate regarding the impact on the security, military effectiveness, human rights and the rule of law. Critics argue that the privatisation of military functions can lead to a lack of accountability, undermine democratic control over the use of force and contribute to conflict escalation. However, proponents argue that PMCs can provide valuable services in certain contexts and offer flexibility and cost savings for governments and international organisations.
She's not talking to you, idiot.
You killed her! You vile nuts! Murderer!
That's rich coming from you. It's overdose, I am. Surrender.
In Metal Gear Solid Rising Revengeance, the game that's not considered canon to the Hideo Kojima's timeline of the Metal Gear franchise and story, would actually really touch up on more on the aspect of 9/11. With Hideo Kojima being the supervising director of this game, would quite naturally touch up on the topics of 9/11 that he wanted to do in Metal Gear Solid 2. But given all the very controversial nature of that game and the date that it came out in the same year as 9/11, it didn't seem plausible. Within the story of Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, there is a PMC called Desperado Enforcement LLC, which often lent its services to terrorists and committed acts of terrorism. One of his customers, Andrei Dolzaev, was a European terrorist who was responsible for the massacre in St. Petersburg in Russia in 2015 and a terror spree in Georgia in 2017. In addition to transforming Sakom Akabzia into a military junta in 2018, the same year Desperado was also responsible for a terrorist attack on Africa, an attack that also resulted in the death of the Prime Minister, as well as a Maverick member, Raiden, being severely injured.
Mind if I got in? All we're saying, give war a chance! No!
With the Patriots' powerful deep state running the world's war economy has been destroyed, and the private military companies have been splintered into numerous factions. The elimination of the Patriot-controlled nanomachines technology used to enhance and regulate soldiers' abilities, PMCs turn to advanced cyborg technology. Desperado serves as the game's main antagonist. Desperado aims to destabilize peaceful nations and preserve conflict, allowing them to reap the financial rewards and technological advancements of the war economy. In regards to 9/11 is where it gets interesting within Metal Gear Rising, because Sundowner himself references the very tragic event that took place on that fateful day. Sadly, many people lost their lives to a political matter, or for whatever reasons that you guys can come up with. It's quite ambiguous to really decide, but we take the narrative that we are given. The context of the conversation and what Sundowner mentions to Raiden is exactly a confirmation of what I've been speaking about. The very events of 9/11 made his company, like Desperado, very profitable to be able to go into war. In fact, it fanned the flames of war, and is which what they are trying to achieve after the fall of the Patriots. In an essence, to keep the war economy alive.
War crime this, code of conduct that. Kids, you can mold, manipulate into performing all kinds of atrocities. And there's nothing like a good atrocity to keep a war going. We're just suppliers. We don't create the market for war. And who does? The Patriots are gone. Those guys just manage the war economy. They didn't invent it. Did you think every battle in history was all part of some big old conspiracy? Bullshit! War is just part of who we are. Why fight it? Anyway, none of this will matter in 3 hours. Demand for PMCs is about to skyrocket. Like the good old days after 9/11.
Right.
what Sundowner said.
I know. Anything that'll rival 9/11 cannot be good.
And in 3 hours, maybe less. He said even Mach 2 could not get there in time.
If he was serious, that's over 4,000 miles away.
4,500. So whatever it is, it's not happening on American soil.
If it's gonna spike demand for PMCs, it's gotta be a political hotspot. A coup or civil war in a stable region wouldn't have a domino effect.
And they'd want to draw in a superpower. No.
What?
The president. He's on his way to Pakistan. If something happens to him there...
Oh, shit. The War on Terror Part 2.
The subsequent War on Terror was also given mentions in Metal Gear Rising. In the climax of the game, one of the posts that Boris directs Raiden to, shortly after it was revealed that the Shazabad Air Base attack had only had its story leaked early, mentioned that Pakistan was part of the Axis of Evil, referring to an actual term made in 2002 by the real-life and then current president George W. Bush during his State of the Union address, referencing Iran, Iraq and North Korea for either aiding terrorists or developing WMDs.
And their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
There seems to be the recurring message in Metal Gear Solid's franchise when it comes to talking about the Patriot's systematic control and the grip that it has on the United States Congress and government. With the very power and means of influence that it has over the very public, in which it can control it through information, by using fear tactics and propaganda in order to sway the public view, to start a war in order to make the public actually agree with the war that perhaps may be created out of false pretenses, and reinforce through a government state media which gets the high percentage of the populace of the masses to actually believe in the information that they're receiving from the mainstream source, which might discredit smaller platforms and other sources of information that could be factual out of the equation, and for some people to be left branded as conspiracy theorists and making the innocent appear to be the enemy. The media's power of influence will forge a single consciousness of the masses within the nation that really is a lot more ambiguous behind the story that is given, with the term of half-truths and convenient truths really do stay relevant.
America's never been made up of just one. But he tried to forge a single consciousness for it and from it. The idea that every citizen will use free will to unite behind their country. Unilateralism like that can't be entrusted to any one individual. So the Major sought a system that used information, words, to control the subconscious.
So there's really no legal recourse to stop World Marshal here? We couldn't leak that video of Armstrong or something?
Boris, Kevin, and I talked this over already. Not gonna work. The media would never show it.
I guess not. That's why PMC started advertising so heavily all of a sudden, isn't it? So they could influence the media.
Yeah, PMCs don't have anything to sell to regular people, but that's not what those ads were for. It's a part of the aftermath of the Patriots' plan for manipulating the public. Restricting press access, allowing cross-ownership between media conglomerates. A media empire as iron-fisted as any other dictatorship.
So much for freedom of speech, huh?
Yeah, the Patriots are gone, but their effect still lingers. It's just too good a scheme for the government to get rid of.
Alright, so we can't go to the news. How about uploading it to some video site?
It'd get buried in the noise. People fabricate videos all the time to discredit other groups and companies. But when it's bullshit the public wants to believe, then it spreads like wildfire. If they don't care, it doesn't get noticed, even when it's the truth.
Within the world of corrupt politics, Colorado Senator Stephen Armstrong attempted to revitalize the war economy via Operation Tamuski, a false flag operation where he had World Marshal would stage a terrorist attack on the Shazabad Air Base in Pakistan, and make it seem as though desperado and jihadi terrorists had attacked the base in an attempt to assassinate President Hamilton on arriving for talks with the Pakistani president, Farooq Salam. Senator Armstrong wanted to revitalize the Patriots' philosophies and continue on their vision. He also had a very Darwinian mindset of a society in which he envisioned. Armstrong believes in the philosophy of the survival of the fittest and seeks to create a world where the strong dominate and the weak perish. To achieve his goal, Armstrong would manipulate political events, orchestrate conflicts, causing the media to go in uproar as well as the public opinion. Hypothetically speaking, if the events of 9/11 was actually a staged event to impact the world economy, it's definitely something that he would have done after staging the such event at the airbase.
You're not ending our plan. You're expanding it. Check the internet lately.
Raiden, Air Force One is turning back to the States.
What? How'd they know?
Someone posted photos of what's happening on the base. The whole world is up in arms.
Show me. How did they? The story leaked early. Then Marshall's plan is ruined.
The hell it is. Look what they're saying. The story just went live, and already they're calling for blood.
But the president was saved.
And yet American blood was spilled.
By Americans. Besides, a few dozen soldiers is tragic, but nothing to start a major war over.
That's just a spark, son. The excuse we've been waiting for. America's wanted this war for years. The Patriots, they knew war was good for the economy. 4 years later, their legacy lingers on.
The memes.
PMCs, arms manufacturers, job creators, Jack. All those workers spending money, paying taxes. Trust me, a little war can work wonders.
So grease the gears with some innocent blood, is that it?
Oh, relax, Jack. It's a war on terror. We're not out to kill civilians. Extremists, lawless gangs, madmen. Of course, that would have to include you.
In the aftermath of the tragic events of 9/11, it's crucial to acknowledge the complexities and the ambiguities surrounding the nature of war and the role of those in the positions of power. Metal Gear as a series masterfully navigates these themes, shedding the light on the corruption and manipulation that fuel the war economy. While it may be unsettling to consider, there have been instances in history where unchecked powers have exploited events to perpetuate the cycle of war. The notion of a false flag operations, where acts of terrorism are orchestrated or manipulated by those in authority to advance their own agendas. Metal Gear prompts us to question the actions of those in positions of power of authority and to demand transparency and accountability. While we cannot definitively attribute such motives to the tragic events of 9/11, it's essential to acknowledge the importance of seeking the truth and holding those responsible to account. In a world where the lines between truth and manipulation are often blurred, it's imperative that we remain vigilant and critically examine the narratives presented to us. By doing so, we honour the memory of those who lost their lives on that fateful day, and strive towards a future where transparency, justice and peace prevail. A message that I believe Hideo Kojima himself was trying to convey, but given on the nature of the subject, might have seemed insensitive or just not very a good idea at the particular time. Hideo Kojima is a director that stands out above the rest, a very man who can see the complexities and the ambiguity of life's themes within the very human existence, and be able to convey these themes in such a masterful, beautiful presentation in what's confined in a video game, which in reality is so much more. It's a message, it's a sense of presentation, of poetry, a symphony, one that can resonate to the Metal Gear community so well that keeps them coming back to explore these very themes, to understand the nature of the human psyche.
従ってしまいますから、新しいキャラクターをプレイヤーにすることで、すごくスネークを客観的に見ることができると。スネークが、
Metal Gear Solid 2 in the development was facing turbulent waters. The very prophetic Hideo Kojima, who probably just understands the very political spectrums of the very manner of the world. Keeping up with world affairs is definitely one of his strong suits. The very development of this game was shrouded by a very mysterious backstory, one that tied in with the tragic events of 9/11. Well, of course, this must have definitely been unintentional. Hideo Kojima could not possibly have known that such disastrous effects of a terrorist event during the time in 9/11 in New York could he have possibly have foreseen. If more than anything, it was truly a case of coincidence, with such themes that Hideo Kojima would brush up on would be very similar to that of the disastrous effects of that very event. That the very game itself was in serious danger of not being released, and that Hideo Kojima at the time thought that he would have to step down from the very company, Konami. Because of Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty's release months after 9/11, several scenes and dialogue were either cut or redone due to the events of the attack. One of these was the crash of Arsenal gear into Manhattan. So how can it not get any more bizarre and very profound? Metal Gear Solid 2 was touching up on world affairs and events that were way ahead of its time, and have never been more relevant than they are today. What truly makes this a very spooky coincidence is the fact that this game was 3 years prior in development to the events of 9/11. The very subjects that Metal Gear 2 touches up on, such as terrorism and the war on terror, even quite a lot of the characters within the game, Solid Snake, Solidus, Dead Cell, are all considered terrorists to the political narrative of the Patriots. There was even released documents of the Metal Gear Solid 2 script, ones that were actually showing that events that would have been taking place. We didn't know that Arsenal was meant to be knocking over the Statue of Liberty whilst roaring past Liberty Island, other than just crashing within Federal Hall from the final result we got within the game. According to sources too, Arsenal gear was also meant to crash into the stock market building, or as we know, the Twin Towers. In the document of Metal Gear Solid 2, the towers were intended to be prominently featured, although nothing is in mention of them in the script. Early in development, a Middle East setting was considered for Metal Gear Solid 2, but was ultimately decided against due to the extremely tumultuous political situation in the Middle East. It is somewhat ironic that in trying to avoid a controversial setting, the game is setting in the same city as one of the most significant terrorist attacks in American history. Some of the last-minute changes were made to Metal Gear 2 were largely superficial, including the removal of American flags from the boss fight between Raiden and Solidus, and changing the spelling of Raiden from Katana to Kanjai, as Katana bore a resemblance to Japanese for Bin Laden. The ending of Metal Gear Solid 2 being altered and late in development due to the events of 9/11, some of you may have noticed that in the cutscene immediately following the battle with Solidus, Raiden swings his sword in a downward arc, for no obvious reason. What he was originally supposed to be doing was severing a line that would cause an American flag to fall over and cover the body of a fallen Solidus some distance below. Whatever Solidus was mouthing just prior to his death in that scene was probably something that was in the original script, which did not survive the subsequent alterations. Therefore, the only people who could really tell us what it was saying would most likely be the actual game developers. Something that, interestingly, I'm surprised nobody has asked Hideo Kojima exactly what Solidus says. But in my mind, I'd like to think it's something that he says to Raiden in terms of fight for truth or fight for liberty. Hence why Raiden cuts down the American flag to cover up Solidus, who in reality was a true patriot and wanted to liberate Manhattan, knowing the true malevolent forces, the very insidious agendas that they have regarding the United States. Yes, the developers figured it wouldn't be a good idea to homage Solidus as being a true patriot through a metaphorical message, given on the fact that throughout the game he is branded as a terrorist to launch a nuclear missile over the skies of Manhattan to shut down the Patriots' control grid. Just unfortunate that at the time that this game coincided with the very tragic events of 9/11. Really, there is nothing truly more profound than what the Metal Gear series has brought to the community that keeps making us question reality, and one that keeps making us think outside the box. A good friend told me once to find something you believe in and find it for yourself. When you do, pass it on to the future. If you want to know what to believe in, well, that's your problem.
Find something to believe in and find it for yourself. And when you do, pass it on to the future.
Believe in what?
That's your problem.